what impact does Rollup Tech have on Ergo? Do Rollups have a future in Ergo, or is scaling simply better with sidechains and or a base layer? And again, I've also seen some discussions as of last week about sidechains versus L2. So some have said that sidechains are I guess, a waste of time in a way. So maybe you guys want to touch on that. First of all, just touch on Rollups and Ergo, and also what are your views on sidechains versus L2s?
Yeah, hard to say because, well, there are different designs, right? So for rollups and sidechains, yeah. So at least so in case of rollup, you have data availability, right, on layer one. Then the question. Probably application specific. Does that help or not really? Right, and for sidechain, so the main issue is consensus, right? I mean, how are you making progress there? But the same is for plasma rollup constructions, right? There are also different designs here, so it's kind of huge space, right, in regards with possible design.
Yeah,
the design's been chosen, so yeah, I mean, it's better to compare concrete designs. But for many applications, I believe maybe either way works, right?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's hard to say because when you get a side chain, I guess we have to define a side chain, which is in and of itself somewhat murky. It has its own consensus mechanism, and what is that? How distributed is it? It's hard to say, right, without any concrete design you're looking at. And the same is true with rollups, where you have how many sequencers are involved, how distributed is it? Is it like a single party running the rollup? Is it distributed? It's hard to say. Like, you have to, I guess, get into the individual specifications of the design and pick apart the assumptions that are involved to really even know. Like, sidechain is such a vague term. It's kind of I don't know. I would say poor in terms of like even a definition. I guess to some degree you could say there's like this idea of like a parent and a child chain where you have like one bigger ecosystem and then like one smaller side chain that's more ecosystem specific. But then as you get into interoperability, like if we bridge to Cardano, I guess Cardano's our side chain, right? Or are we Cardano's side chain? Or how do you know that? Because you have different, different consensus mechanisms, different purposes, but they're connected. So in a way, it's hard to even say, like, how does someone define a side chain? A rollup is at least a little bit easier because you inherit security from the base layer. But you also have some trade-offs. Whenever you get like, I guess, these ways to make blockchains move faster, there's always some trade-off in terms of security and assumption that, I guess is acceptable or not. But a lot of the times people don't even look or understand like the assumptions that they need to make.
It's kind of a buzzword, isn't it, in a way? Sidechains, because we want things to go faster, we want things to be, asynchronous, but not asynchronous. We want things to, we want to have our own, like, sidecar in the big motorcycle type of thing, right? We want to have our own seat on the motorcycle, but still want to ride with the big boys.
We want the Web 2 experience in Web 3, right?
Right. And this is what me and you, Joe, have been talking about as far as potentially building a roll-up for Palmyra for what is being built at Zengate to make sure that we can handle the volume of transactions that are going to be coming in. And it's not just as easy as like, okay, well, you make the blockchain go fast, you just make a side chain, and that, or you just make a roll up, and it'll make it fast. Like, well, yeah, but it doesn't, it doesn't come out of thin air. So if you're making it faster, then you're sacrificing something else that made it slower on the main chain, right? So that made it slower if, say, we're using, say, Ergo or Cardano, and then we're all of a sudden making something that they can take in more throughput, and we're using the same chain, but it's doing it faster. So that means that we're say maybe sacrificing decentralization for federation speed.
Yeah, I say that like in the broader context of the market currently, like L2s are probably winning in terms of adoption, but there's a pretty small subset of really successful L2s, and they're usually pretty centralized. So it's hard to say. I don't
Polygon, it's how did they, Ethereum doesn't scale. Okay, that made Polygon. Well,
there's a couple.
I mean,
there's a couple, but it's a pretty small group so far. But
but even with that though, even with Polygon, I mean, that thing is, I wouldn't say it's like the the poster child for decentralization. Or if we look at, say, BNB, I mean, the thing's got 12 validators. I mean, it's fast and it's cheap, but it's not really decentralized. I mean, it's barely federation. It's not even decentralization. So you just have to think about that. I mean, it doesn't happen out of thin air unless your network evolved and scaled naturally to meet the demand and went through all the hurdles of scaling and figuring what the community wants as far as, okay, well, we know we can't have everything, right? So what is more important to us? How do we keep our first principles and still create something that is more, I would say, mainstream viable for us to build stuff on, that is a replacement for the current system? I mean, even going back to, I mean, it's not even really sidechain related, but just a good example of that, of things not really being viable as a replacement for the current system, was like, say, the Bitcoin network before Lightning Network went into play. I mean, it's the transaction speeds and fees were so high. It's like, what is the point? What if you're actually, I mean, if you believe in like the core values of it, of course, it's just, you'd rather use that instead of the banking cabal. But in essence, if you're just thinking about it in a way, okay, I send payment, right? I want to send a payment from me to somebody else. Who do I use? Well, do you use somebody who has no security, nobody you can call, right? Nobody you can call that charges the same amount of money as the bank would for a transaction, and sometimes takes almost as long as a bank does to do the transaction. Well, if you're just an average user, say, okay, what's the point? Why would I use that? So you have to really think about these things when you're creating these networks, and if it's not evolved naturally, then that's what happens. You want fast, well, you're not going to get decentralized. If you want decentralized, well, that's gonna slow things down. And you're going to have to scale to be fast enough. Yeah, so that's it's always a trade-off.